Well, hello and welcome back to my workshop. I'm wanting to talk to you a little bit about learning because this is my classroom these days, and I'm a learner, as are you and all your children and everybody around us. It's human nature to be able to learn. In fact, it's part of all animals. It's built into our very nervous system. Sometimes, of course, learning seems burdensome and tiring, and we don't really want to learn. And so we prefer to keep ourselves busy with things that are easier. What we don't think about is that we're actually learning with everything that we do. The main difference between just learning something from experience and really growing and fully benefiting from that experience is reflecting. When we reflect on what we learn, we draw out everything that could have been learned from that experience. And if we share it, then others will benefit from that experience as well, which is very much a part of how God made us as human beings. And we have this urge to share with one another what we've learned. And in so doing, we grow together and we become part of each other's lives. This tendency to connect is amplified by written words and by videos. The language arts in general is really a sharing of what we are experiencing, or what we have experienced or observed, which is a type of experience. So as an example, here's me wanting to learn how to become a woodworker. And I've come a fair ways in it, but I'm not done, not even close. I've got a lot to learn. I want to be able to produce high quality furniture and ornamental things that would be very valuable. I don't know if I'll sell them, but that's not the point. The point is to be able to craft something of enduring quality. And so that's a learning process. I made this table here, and I'll just do a very quick job of showing you what I learned making this table. Maybe you can apply some of the learning principles to that. If you look at this table, I think you can see from where you are that there's light and dark areas on it. Some of the finish has been sanded out and some of it hasn't. And these represent very, very subtle highs and lows in the finish. So I can actually go over it and feel highs and lows. And I can feel areas that are rough and areas that are smooth. So I can take that out with hand sanding, but I'd rather machine sand it so that it was all flat. So I'm in the process of learning what's the best process for finishing a top like this. This top is what's called a torsion box assembly. And inside here, underneath this top, is a grid of plywood that's set on edge all the way along, all the way across. And that keeps it very stiff and flat. This is not an ornamental piece. This is a functional piece of shop furniture. It's actually built out of used wood that's been part of another piece of furniture in the past. And this was once part of an aquarium stand, these drawers. And this is all found leftover wood that's holding this together on the sides. The legs are actually made out of 100-year-old piano wood. Was once used to support the back of a piano, but the piano was destroyed, and so I got some of the wood. So those are some of the things that sort of tell me the story. My recent project was to create this top. The top has holes in here to suck air out, and it sucks out of this area here. from here to here. 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of holes where air gets drawn in and drawn out of here with a vacuum. And I wanted to make sure that the area of these holes was the same as the area of all these holes. So I had to use pi and a formula for the area of a circle to figure out how many of these holes would equal the area of 2 of these holes. So I learned how to do that, and I'm learning how to finish it. But I've learned a few things about how to assemble a complicated piece like this as well. I learned that it's a multi-part project. There's lots of small parts. And I learned that if I ever make another object with so many parts, I will have to make sure I check out all my tools to make sure they're extremely square, because any small deviation builds up over time. Any part that's just slightly too big gets multiplied by the number of parts that you have, unless some of the parts are also too small. And you don't like making parts too small because you can always cut more off. So what I learned is that if there's lots of parts like this, then perhaps it would be better to cut your parts as you go and then fit them one at a time, rather than cut all the parts at the beginning. It's a lot more convenient to cut all the parts at the beginning, but I think I should have cut the parts as I went. For a complex project like this one, I need to learn to do more planning ahead of time, more about the design, but also the order of assembly. There are things that I did too late and too soon in the assembly project. For example, I drilled these holes after I glued the top down. Now you'd think that would make sense. You glue the top down and then you would put holes in there. But it turns out that the holes, the wood kind of blows out at the bottom. So I had to open up the underneath there to repair the problem that I had inside there. So I should have drilled these holes out before I put the top down. The other thing that I found out was that when to use fasteners, when we're not, or I should have planned how to use fasteners in this particular project. So I didn't use any nails to hold the top down, but that caused me to have some warpage. And I didn't want to have nails in this top, but I could have had some. I could have had nails around the outside. That would have been nice. See, what you can see here is that I've had to plane the wood flat, and since it's plywood, I've exposed the layer underneath here. I mean, that's fine. It's not going to affect the usability of the top, but I had to do some cosmetic damage because the priority here is on a flat top. This was bumped up because it wasn't pushed all the way down. If I had used nails around the outside, then I would have had this completely flat here. But there's a few other things like that. So I didn't plan the nails, I just put this down, then I found out I had trouble clamping it. So then I had problems with making sure it was flat. And you know, nothing is ever quite square, and so I had trouble with getting this piece to fit inside this frame because I thought I'll just make it square. Make it to fit, don't try to make everything just square and measure to size. So those are some examples of things that I have learned. I've also used a water-based finish on this, and water-based finish, I've never used water-based finish, but it has some interesting qualities. You don't get that oil-based look where the grain pops. It just looks like fresh raw wood and then covered over. So that's okay. I mean, some people might like that look. I prefer the grain to pop, you know, for everything, for the finish to show the grain off. I didn't get that this time. I might use water-based finish again though, because it's very easy to sand, and if I was using oil-based finish, I'd have a problem with these highs and lows that I showed you before, but I know I can sand these off. I also learned that you should sand with water on a water-based finish using water as a lubricant rather than using oil as a lubricant, which is my usual go-to. The oil and the residue that I sanded off didn't mix very well, and so it didn't make a very good lubricant for sanding. So those are some examples of how I was able to learn what I want to be able to do by reflecting on what I've done. Now, if I had not reflected on it, I would very quickly forget everything I just told you. And I may likely make most of the mistakes like 2 or 3 times again before I actually learn my lesson. That's why I often will say, you don't learn from practice. You learn from reflecting on practice. Think about what you're learning and share it. Because you are learning in everything you're doing, but you really learn when you reflect and share. Have a good time learning. You're all great learners. And don't forget to reflect and share on what you're learning.